Okay.
The adrenaline.
I know. Hello, everyone who is joining us.
I see some familiar faces from the last session.
Yeah.
It's good to see.
Yeah, this is like a part 2 of our Woman in Voice portfolio chat that was not recorded. So I am very excited that this will be recorded so people can access it after the fact. So I guess, should we dive in? Maybe I think that I should have my guests introduce themselves before. I'm assuming that everyone here knows who they are. Let's just go and have Millani, you can start and introduce yourself a little bit, and then Elaine can go after that.
Sounds good. So thanks, Hillary. Hi, everyone. I'm Millani. I'm currently a senior conversation designer at 247.ai. And for those who might have heard my voice, might have seen my face here and there, I'm also the podcast host and producer for the Voice This podcast. So great to see everyone. Prior to being a conversation designer, I was also a UX strategist for 3 years at Home Depot. So portfolios I've been doing for quite some time, and I feel your pain. So we'll spend the next hour sharing our pain. No, I'm kidding. And answering your questions and making sure we're all feeling better after this session. So great to see everyone and can't wait.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can we just take a moment and appreciate how put together Millani and Hillary look today? I love it. I love the vibe we're going for. So hi everyone, I'm Elaine Anzaldo. I'm a conversation designer. I currently work at Meta, but I previously worked at NLX, and I also did other projects in voice here and there at other companies. For example, I worked on Siri. I worked at SRI International, which is actually the birthplace of Siri, working on various speech projects, but I'm very happy to be in design. Although I have written a lot about it, just getting into conversation design from like an annotation and somewhat technical background was a little bit harder because like I didn't have like this like UX design stamped on my resume and portfolio. So that's the kind of angle that I'll be taking today. But yeah, great to meet everyone.
Yeah, and if you don't know me as well, I am Hillary, and I am a conversation designer and marketer. I also created the job board conversationdesignerjobs.com. So because of that, I have a lot of experience viewing people's portfolio and helping a lot of people sort of navigate how to switch jobs and get into the field. As I'm someone that did that. I come from a social media background and a marketing background, and I sort of stumbled into conversation design about 6 years ago. So my portfolio is very lacking in terms of its functionalities. However, I have a lot of great references in terms of, you know, what companies are looking for when it comes to your portfolios, and sort of how you can, you know, make experience if you don't yet have experience, was a question that a few people asked. So with that, let's just dive in. And I think, you know, both these first 2 questions, we could sort of just say, what you think is the must-have information or projects or things that a person should have in their portfolio. Like, we can kind of start with, what's the basics? Like, if you have a portfolio or not, where should people start in terms of creating a portfolio? What's the must-haves?
A portfolio with your name would be nice. So start off with that.
Yeah.
Well, name who you are, what you've done so far. So any projects you've done at work or any sort of side projects, pretty much to prove that, hi, I want to get this job, whatever it may be, conversation UX. This is me. This is my potential. And then maybe an about me page and be like, hi, I also have a life on the side, I promise, you know, and sprinkle some personality in there as well. For now.
What do you think, Elaine?
Yeah, I echo the same thing. You have to have your name and you have to have the title of the job that you're applying for. So make it very clear that you're applying for conversation designer roles. And I say this because there are a lot of like adjacent roles, maybe like chatbot developer or linguistic engineer or any other kinds of roles that have to do with conversational AI and conversation design, just be very, very clear of what you want. And I would also say your portfolio doesn't have to be like this super flashy website, but I do recommend it being a separate entity from your resume. So you should have a resume, and on your resume, you should have a link to some other entity. And it could be like, I don't know, a Google slide presentation, it could be a website, it could be a Notion page, it could be whatever you want. But essentially, you have to have the separate link, I guess, to showcase your work.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and that can sort of lead into our next question. But yeah, I want to say too, if you are coming from a different field, which I know many of you here are, and you might have an existing portfolio in your other discipline, whether that's UX or linguistics or marketing or whatever it is, you could even have like a separate tab on your existing portfolio that is just for conversation design. I've seen people do this before where they sort of have, it's almost like you have two portfolios, but you have this information separated, and you could even use a different URL, like an entirely different website URL to direct to just that page. And then if the person, happened to be looking for UX design skills, they could go over to your UX design portfolio. So it's a really good way to kind of segment out the work that you are doing specific to conversation design. So you can just be very specific about the skills that you have, your resume, what projects you've done, etc., all on that. So, what would you say are the best platforms or tools that people should be using for their portfolio? Someone had mentioned, is Medium a good platform for your portfolio? Is whatever else, is it necessary to have something that is super pretty? Like, what do you think in terms of, what I always say is kind of pick what's easiest, but what would you think in terms of like where people should be starting if they don't have an existing portfolio, they want to like start completely fresh?
Personally, for my personal experience, I went straight to GoDaddy and I was like, everyone's doing this. I want to be special. I want to create a website. I went straight in and then I tried to use GoDaddy. I'm like, this is so complicated. My brain hurts. I don't know what I'm doing. And I even called GoDaddy. I'm like, I don't know how to use this. Like I maybe have too many features. Like, can you remove that? It was like a whole thing. So it's all about easy platform, whatever you're comfortable with, Medium, Notion, Google Docs, whatever. Just make it an easy, pretty much make it a case study or a website that's easy for other people to view. And it's not, full of information. It's not confusing. So try to figure out a platform that works for you. And if you want to try new things, go at it for sure. Yeah, try GoDaddy or Notion or whatever it may be. But I think the key thing is just try to use a platform that you're comfortable with. And if you have the time to learn, have fun, do it all, whatever. If you don't have time, try to get a platform that it's not about, pumping out a flashy website, as Elaine said. It's about getting something out there so that someone can see and then, judge and hire you after. So,
yeah. What do you think, Elaine?
I'm a little biased in my answer because I feel like it's not super hard if you really want to use like a website building template. So if you do go to like something like Wix, or I think there's something called like UX Design Portfolio Template. I forget exactly what the tool is called, but there are a lot of websites that have pre-made templates for design portfolios. So you could probably just start there and then fill in the content as needed. If I speak from my personal experience, I wouldn't recommend this, but I actually was learning how to code websites prior to getting into conversation design. So by the time I came into conversation design, I was able to make my own website. And that's the one that's still alive now. It's very bare bones, but it got the job done. It's mobile friendly. And it has all of the information that you need, links. Like I have a YouTube video that's embedded in it. I have like a link to my resume. Honestly, your tool that you choose could be anything. I think, Hillary, you mentioned someone mentioned Medium. And I think I've seen UX design candidates actually write their case studies on Medium. So, I mean, it's not like a bad option if you're just like, I don't want a website. I just want a blog that I already know how to use.
Yeah, and I think that something that you know how to use is very key in this, because there's a million tools out there. You could make this as hard or as easy as you want, but the main key is that you just do it. And so if you're like, I'm going to learn Squarespace and then make a portfolio, and it's taking you longer to like learn Squarespace, that's more time that you don't have a portfolio. So I think it's just like the key is pick something easy and know that you can always add on, you can always enhance it, you can always redo it. But just having something, and that's why like Notion is usually my top recommendation, or like Canva. I've seen a lot of portfolios on Canva recently because they have templates, and just pick something that is very easy and is going to communicate these things that we've said. Visuals were not really a part of these must haves for your portfolio, and having this well-designed website, while it definitely is appealing and it looks great, it's not going to make or break whether someone wants to hire you. What is going to make or break is like you not having a portfolio at all. So kind of just keep that in mind, and like start with what is maintainable for you and what is quick and easy for you. And actually, this is kind of along with the visuals as well, is how to grab audience attention and maintain it while they're looking at your portfolio. So I would say maybe for either of you, if you have done hiring for your team or you're reviewing people's portfolios that you're maybe mentoring, what are things that sort of make you tune out from when you're looking at someone's website? Because this is something that I very much am in the habit of doing, is if there's too much there, I will kind of just like lose interest. So what would you say is sort of the best way that people can maintain that attention while you are reviewing their portfolio?
Yeah, I can go first. So I have experience looking and trying to hire onto my team previously. And I would say like the first, I guess, deal breaker is like if they just show me like what's the problem, like what's the scenario that they're designing for, and then the prototype, and then there's like no steps in between of like how they got from where they started and how the outcome that they ended up with. Like that immediately makes me think like there was no design process described here, so I can't even evaluate the work you did. I don't know if you just created something out of thin air, or if you used a real user feedback to make this final outcome. So that's like the first thing. It's like making sure that you're describing the whole process. If there's no process, it reflects really poorly on that case study. And I think the second thing, and I made this mistake before. So I recently had like a little quick interview with VoiceFlow about creating conversation design portfolios. And basically what I shared with them there that I'll share now again, which is super embarrassing, but I basically just had a canvas view of my prototype in the bot building software that I was using. So I just linked it there in my case study. And I didn't actually have like a final demo prototype that shows the back and forth interaction is how that conversation would go in real life. I just showed the ins and outs skeleton of like the design flow rather than, some kind of real live demonstration. If you don't have that live demonstration, I also feel like it reflects poorly, because it's like you're not able to show in context what would this conversation sound like.
Yeah. Do you think that you need to also show that canvas? And you need to have that like canvas view in addition to the actual conversation playing out?
So I will say it should be there. So if either you use like a Canvas tool or some kind of spreadsheet to organize your intents and use that kind of organization, it should be linked under like maybe one of your sections of like, this is my process, but it really shouldn't be the star of your case study.
Yeah.
I pretty much echo everything Elaine said. There's also another factor where people put so much information, there's so much text, it's like a whole novel, and there's really no proof of like no visuals as to like are there sketches on there, like what's the process. I think that's daunting. Once I see that, I'm like, whoa, relax, okay, now that's a little too much. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah.
pretty much like you just have to put out the points, because you also have to think of who's reading your portfolio, right? It could be managers, it could be hiring managers who don't have too much context to the role, so it has to be appealing to whom you're targeting it to. So half the time no one's ready to read novels. Like HR recruiters are not sitting there going, okay, let me read this novel. No, like they don't have time for that. They're trying to skim through as many portfolios as possible, and you want to make sure that your portfolio stands out and sticks. So no novels, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of the main thing. And that can go with a resume too, of like having way too much text where your resume is 2 or 3 pages. Make sure that you're communicating your like key points. And if you can communicate that in bullet points, that's great. Or if it's a short paragraph, that's great. But I feel like you can address a lot in more brief sentences. And oftentimes people don't need all of the background and all of the details. They just kind of need to know what you did, what your role was, you know, what you would improve if you could, what you learned from doing this, and how you approached this problem and how you arrived at your solution. So kind of if you could come up with your own script, I guess, for how you're outlining these case studies, and then continue to use that and just leave out everything else. You don't need to kind of summarize every single little thing in this case study. And speaking of case studies, how do you suggest, and I know that both of you had experience with this before you found your first role, is how people can create case studies if they don't actually have job experience. So whether they are coming from another field, taking a course, et cetera, how would someone really approach creating a case study from like a fictional job?
I can start with my experience. So for me, it was getting into UX and then getting into conversation design was kind of the same hurdle of like, oh no, I don't have actual work experience. From UX and conversation design, I took boot camps and then I started looking for jobs. So in those boot camps, I was able to actually write case studies based off of projects we worked on. So at the UX boot camp, I worked on 3 projects and we wrote case studies for each of them for the purpose of putting it onto the portfolio. So the boot camp was kind of crafted that way, that everyone kind of gets out with a portfolio of 3 case studies, and they kind of gave us an outline of, you know, how to write it, what processes, what you've done, and how to outline it. And then when it came to conversation design, I also did a boot camp there as well. It was one project, and what I did for that is I kind of put in the recording of my presentation onto that. So I was able to kind of talk about my process, show me on there, show my bot in action. So that was kind of my way. So really just kind of finding a problem. If there's, you know, maybe on your day-to-day, maybe an app that you're working on or you're trying to use and you're like, oh, if only, you know, sometimes you'll work on something and be like, oh, if only this was better. There you go. Take it and roll with it and write up a case study, do some interviews, take it on. And who knows, it can be the case study that gets you a role, that actually gets you to get paid to do this. So.
And how about you, Elaine?
Yeah, 100% with what Millani said. I think you don't really have to worry too much about like, oh, I'm going to make an Alexa skill. I'm going to have it added to like the skill store. Like it's going to be live for real users to use in their own homes. Like I don't think you need to go that far. That's not mandatory. The thing that is, I think, a little bit required is something that Millani mentioned, like testing. Like, yeah, you can find a problem, you can find like some use case that you're really excited about, but I think what also goes hand in hand with that is just trying to follow like the general design process and making sure that like you're not only working off of your own assumptions, that you are scheduling like some user interviews to do like a little bit of UXR on your own. I really highly recommend doing Wizard of I was testing, because it's actually one of my favorite parts of conversation design is pretending that you have like your bot built out already and tricking someone into believing it's real. Like there is no adrenaline like, oh shoot, like I hope I make it in time to play this TTS, or else the person is gonna know it's fake. Like that's a really great experience, and I would encourage everyone to try that out. Even if you don't get to do like the research part, try to get some friends, just test on them. Like again, it doesn't have to be super formal. You don't have to like actually go to like usersurvey.com and like get users and pay them with gift cards or other monetary compensation. Another way that I also kind of hacked that, because like I had friends, but they were all busy at that moment when I really needed them for like a quick turnaround project. So what I did is I actually went online on Twitter and I was like, yo, who likes Netflix? And do you want to be interviewed about how much you like Netflix? And I got like 20 responses from just people who were following my account, and they were like, sure, I volunteer. Like I'm okay. Like you can ask me anything. And that's how I was able to also do some testing for one of my case studies.
I feel bad because for testing for my conversation design bootcamp, I would set up meetings with my coworkers and be like, okay, now that we're done, do you have 10 minutes? And I would send them the link and be like, hey, well, here's a scenario. Let's pretend. And they already knew that I was taking the course anyway. And they're like, oh my God, Millani. But they're like, okay, let's go. So be creative. You can find them anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. You can find people, whether it's friends, coworkers, posting on Twitter, posting in conversation design community. There's a lot of people I think that would be willing to help, because you can also say, you can return the favor, especially for all of the 40 people who are here. You can also test their experience, and it can be sort of, you can create these like buddies where you just help each other out, give each other feedback on each other's portfolios and projects, etc. So don't be shy with asking people to test. And then also, of course, don't be offended if they say no or they're too busy. Just keep at it and don't take that personally, because people are busy, but people are definitely willing to help. I also think communities like Women in Voice or like ADP List are places where you can get professional advice from people. So that's something to consider when you are, looking for people to test or to review your portfolio or your resume, et cetera, et cetera. What was my next question here? Oh, so sort of speaking of these like fictional projects, do you think that it's better for someone to have several projects that are small? So I know, Elaine, you mentioned like they don't have to be live experiences. This could be something you want to create or et cetera. Having several of those, or having one that's just a big project that maybe you did a freelance project or something and you worked on that, or you spent all of your time working on this one bot that you went all the way to the finish line. Which do you think is more, I guess, valuable to have in your portfolio?
Quality over quantity. Thank you. Just kidding. But obviously
Nice
that's what
job.
it is. That's it. Like people hiring you aren't like counting, going 1, 2, oh no, 1, 2, 3, oh there you go. It's not about the quantity for sure. If you have those projects, yes, show yourself off. If you have one really good one, put that on. So I think it's all about quality. If you're proud of the project, put it on. If you're not proud of it, do something to make yourself proud of it and then put it on. So quality over quantity. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like quickly muted and unmuted myself. I guess, yeah, same thing. Like I don't think there's like a specific number count of like how many case studies you need. I don't think our field is that mature or developed yet to have like a hard requirement of like quantity. Maybe as like a general guideline is like, if you did work freelance on a big project that took all your time, or you do have like a skill that's like live in the market, maybe you can just focus on one, like because you're working with real user data, like that's really what employers want to look at, is like, do you respond well to like how people use your experience? So if you already have those information, then I think it's fine to just have like a really great one, really well developed one. And if we're talking a little bit more of like this didn't actually go out to like real users, then I don't know, maybe one really good one, maybe a second one if you have like a fun one on the side. Two is kind of what I'm leaning toward, but it's, again, not a hard requirement. It's really all about how well you present your process and ideas. So yeah, there's no real number to shoot for, and every employer actually has different preferences on like what they're looking at specifically. So don't try to like design your portfolio for all of the companies out there.
Yeah. And even if you think of like during an interview, you're not going to have time to talk about every single project that you've done. You probably will only have time to talk about one, or maybe they'll want to know information about two. I feel like two or more, it's sort of just knowing that you did do them. And if they are these, smaller, not necessarily built out projects, it might just be like, okay, you're trying to just like hit all of the points and you're not necessarily seeing how you can improve this more. So perhaps, if you have this really big project, you could pair it with a smaller project that is more of just like a passion project of yours, an idea that you have or something like that. Okay, I want to definitely get to this question, and I know we talked about it in the last session quite a bit, which is how to showcase your work if you are not able to name the client that the work is for. So whether you signed an NDA or you were let go from your job or something happened or you're looking for a new job and you don't want your employer to know, what are ways that you could sort of get around presenting your work when you have those sort of restrictions of not being able to say the name of the company?
Yeah, so I have a recent example from someone that I know. He reached out because he was interviewing for a job recently, and what he told me, and apparently like this went really well with like the company he was interviewing at, is that he told them, "Hey, I have this project. It's under really strict NDA. I can't show you any of my work, but it did get launched, like it is live, so you can see the actual interaction here." And what he actually did is that instead of showing like sketches or like really every step of the design process, he showed he essentially pixelated some of like the dialogues that he wrote, and then just showed the final result to kind of convey there was some iteration that happened, but obviously I can't share with you because I'm under an agreement. So I know you could do something like that, or if you do have more than one project to talk about, maybe you don't need to talk about this project specifically at all. And I say this because like sometimes the NDA work we do is really exciting. It's maybe with like a really big company, but we just can't talk about it. That actually happened with me when I was interviewing this year. I was like really bummed because I had this like really great client work that I did for. It was a national airline, and I was like, I can't even talk about it, but it's such a huge impact design that actually went live. And I thought that my interview would go poorly because I didn't have something at that scale, and I was interviewing at a really big company. So I was really worried about that, but turns out they didn't really care about, like, oh, like you don't have this experience with this massive national airline. They didn't care. What they really cared about was, again, just me showing the design process and that I was considering like many, many different things other than just pure design, that I was conscious of the fact that, there are privacy implications with like conversation design, that I'm also thinking of that I'm aware of, that anything that I design can be imitated and used by other companies. So, that ethical responsibility of making sure that we're not, use dark patterns in our design. So there's so many other things that you could show about yourself that don't necessarily always have to be like just about, the different iterations that went on through a project.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
She killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's like if you want to share some work, I think the idea of sort of hiding that identifying information is really good. I think if you want to recreate and completely remove any mention of a brand, if you want to change the dialogue and not really have it in any way be identifiable to this company and use that to still talk about your work or talk about what the experience does, but not, mention any of that information. I think that that is still a way that it can be effective without needing to mention the brand and, say airlines company or something like that. Or, just mentioning that you have experience working in a certain industry, and not really going into detail about what that project actually was. And one more thing to keep in mind too is that just because it is a really big brand doesn't necessarily mean it's the best reflection of your work. I personally used to do some work with a really, really big cosmetics retailer, and their experience was horrible and like not to any fault of my own, honestly. And we were doing a lot of, strategy work with them and trying to educate them on what they should be doing, and whether or not they choose to kind of take that advice is up to them. So just because I have this big reputable name that I would love to be able to attribute to myself, it actually wasn't the best reflection of my work. And so I wouldn't necessarily even want to share that because I want to focus on things that I can sign off on all aspects of, what occurred here, not just the name of the company.
I agree. Although I never had experience because I was able to do whatever I want, so it was great. No, I'm kidding. But I never signed an NDA, so all the case studies, all I have on my portfolio were okay. But I agree with both of them. Again, it's about if you're proud to put on your work, right? It's not about the name, it's not about the brand. Don't tie yourself to that. It's about your work. So, say if you replace it with a brand name and put it, an industry, a specific industry, is that the same thing? Are you proud of that? Great, put it on. If you're not, yikes, do something else, find
Yeah.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are ways to sort of anonymize that and talk about it in a more vague way. And I've seen people do that very effectively and create these case studies that just generally talk about, what things we're trying to solve here. And especially if it's an industry or a brand that's not doing something that's like completely revolutionary, when you remove a lot of those things, it often is impossible to tell who it could be. It could be anyone. So I think the more vague you can get about who this is for, that's definitely is good. And I think being upfront about the fact that you did sign an NDA, with the people you're interviewing with, that's also important. And I would think they would respect that you are not going to break that with them, and they're going to see that as a pro for you. Okay, we have so many questions that I know we're not going to get to, so I want to make sure that we cover the big ones. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting one. So, if a person has a portfolio that's not in English, how can they make it appeal to English speaking recruiters? Have you ever encountered this? I've encountered this once or twice where people from other countries will have their portfolio translated into languages. So they'll have it in their native language and then with like a drop down, have it in English. But have you seen any other ways that people are sort of addressing their ability to work with English speaking recruiters if they are a non-English portfolio?
I've seen translations as well. So they would have it in their language and then they would have it in English too. So I was able to kind of follow through without having to, find a way to translate the page or anything like that. So I found that interesting because you can also see how they translate their thoughts rather than getting a translator. You want to make sure that your points come off the way you want it to come off. So translated would be nice. And plus, when you're doing bullet points, it's not so much, hopefully.
Yeah, to have like a side by side. And I would assume that this person is speaks English if you are interested in working with English speaking companies, that you also speak English. So I would think that you would be willing to, offer that information and saying that you, speak fluent English, however your native language is, whatever else that it is.
Yeah, I guess my take on this is I actually haven't seen too many of these cases. Sometimes there are actually roles that do ask for native speakers who are also designers. So I think that is going to be like an increasing role in these next few years. But strictly talking about English, I think a really good example is try to look at like press releases of like other language market chatbots or products. And I say this because I saw one recently. By recently, I mean like probably March. That was about this Turkish e-commerce company that I think had like a WhatsApp bot. And all of the screenshots that they shared on the press release were in Turkish, but they were describing the interaction and the value that this chatbot brought to that specific market of customers. So that's really like all that's needed. You don't always need to translate, or maybe just translate what is happening in this interaction. I think that's really just like the minimum requirement. And once I find it, I'll just send it to you, Hillary, so you can
Yeah.
link it here.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think, yeah, it's definitely like describing the things is a really good idea. Thinking of it as almost like the alt text of your images. If you do have these screenshots or whatever experience that is in another language, you could describe that in English as well. That's really cool. This question is for you, Elaine, specifically. Someone had asked how to build a multimodal portfolio project and if anyone had ideas or references. And I know you have experience with this, so I thought you might have an idea or two.
Yeah, I think the first thing about like a multimodal portfolio project that differentiates it from like just like a conversational like voice project is the competitive analysis part. So you really want to focus on other projects that are already multimodal if they exist, other products and those interactions or how they hand off an user from phone to screen to back. I think it's really good to start looking at those kind of things before you even get started with your own project. And then I guess the second thing would be when you're writing up the case study, also talk a little bit about like the visual design, how it impacted the conversational aspect or how the conversational aspect impacted the visuals, because that's really what happens all the time. You do have to make trade-offs because like there's not enough screen space, or like you are literally flooding the user with tons of information at a single moment in time. So there are trade-offs that are going to happen, and it's really good to talk about them up front.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any examples that you have seen of these types of projects?
So actually the project that I did, I have my case study on Behance. I think it's like Netflix, multimodal, whatever. Behance is actually a really cool platform for those multimodal case studies because it wasn't just me who has a case study. There are like tons of other like people, other designers who have integrated voice design considerations into visuals. So I would say that platform itself, if you search on Behance like something like voice assistant or like voice design, I think you'll see other case studies like that.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And yeah, there's a lot of different types of designs documented on that platform. I find that it also is a place that a lot of UX designers who might be working on conversational products or projects, they'll also post their work there just because they're more familiar with using that type of platform. And speaking of places to share, what's the best place to share your portfolio to keep your work on other people's radar? Any thoughts?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
That's it.
honestly, like when I first started posting on LinkedIn, it would just be about, look at this project I did, or like a screenshot of like, I completed this course, or it was just, I feel like it's really an effective place because that's where most of the industry lives on.
That's where your target market is. That's where
Yeah.
HR is. Spit it out. That's one thing I regret. I didn't do any of that. I just did my portfolio in a corner and then put on my resume, and then I'm like, okay, I'm too shy to do this. And now I'm like, please rate my portfolio if you could, please. But yeah, that's definitely where I would.
Did you say rate?
LinkedIn.
So like
Rate
out
it.
of 10?
No,
Rate
no. Please don't. I don't want to know. Kidding. Actually, it's funny because I actually edited my portfolio a couple of days ago because I'm like, wait, how good is it? I don't even. But anyway, yeah, LinkedIn definitely. Find wherever your people are at. Where do you want to apply? Where are they? Spam them.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely. And there are multiple ways on LinkedIn that you can share this information. So in addition to creating a post about it when you have a new project or you just launch your portfolio or whatever it is. And then you can also add featured content. So that will show up right on your profile, like at the top with an image. You can link to your specific case studies or you can link to your portfolio as a whole. There's a lot of different ways to sort of get your content out there via LinkedIn. So that's definitely very helpful. And I also have to promo my own site, which is Conversation Designer Jobs. This is more for if you are looking for a job, you can create a candidate profile that includes a link to your portfolio. So this is a good way to sort of get on the radar of people who are hiring because they will see your profile if you are a match. But definitely LinkedIn, I would say, is probably the top social channel for our industry, maybe followed by Twitter, but I feel like everything is just LinkedIn and that's it.
Oh yeah, when you mentioned like sending your portfolio to whoever's hiring, another thing that worked is having like a copy of my resume and my portfolio link at the hand always, because you never know when you're going to see someone like in a webinar like, hey, drop your email and portfolio link in the chat because we're hiring, or not just events, but also different Slack communities also have sometimes job boards, and like the hiring manager or someone who knows the hiring manager will say like, hey, DM me. And so what worked for me, and what actually was like the thing that helped me get an interview at NLX in the first place, is because like literally like 5 seconds after someone from the company posted about the job, I was like, hi, here's my resume and my portfolio. So really having it on hand and just like spamming it to anyone who is hiring is like also a good strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will always hear those types of conversations. I mean, I feel like it's come up in every event that I have done where a person on a panel is like, I'm actually hiring for my team. And being able to send that information immediately afterwards, whether that is in the chat, in a Google Doc like this one, or via email, it's a very great way to have a personal connection, which is like the best way to sort of stay top of mind and be on people's radars. I know that people who share their information with me, I remember who they are, even if I don't know them. So it is a really good way to kind of just have that ready so that when a person asks for it, you can just send it and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. We actually have almost made it through all of our questions. I'm very proud of us. How is everyone doing? I love seeing all of these reactions, and I hope that everyone is getting a lot out of this chat. One thing that we have not talked about yet is sort of people who want to switch into a role of conversation design. They have other skill sets. Maybe it's from UX, it's from linguistics, it's from copywriting, it's from customer support. And they want to create a link between the two and use it in their portfolio, whether that's in that about section or when they're talking about their skill set on their resume. What are sort of good ways that people can make their previous positions more valuable when they are trying to position themselves as a conversation designer?
A lot of what you do in UX and other roles are very much related to what you're going to be doing in conversation design anyway. So whether it's following the process and so on. So regardless of how you communicate it, try your best to tie it into whether skills or about me, even in the about section, just talking about what you've done and how you're going to take that into the roles that because by saying I have this much experience in this many projects, this many years, I've done this, that's good enough to be like, hey, that's transferable, right? So try to highlight as many transferable skills as possible in the case studies and the about me page, because the more, and sometimes I never thought about it until like I started talking to managers and they're like, wait a minute, that's transferable. Yeah, for sure. We want to know more about it. I'm like, oh, then let me continue. So it's just, I feel like sometimes we don't realize how much of our skills are very transferable. So yeah, just kind of, it's easier to translate in my opinion. I feel like that's a mindset to have first before even starting a portfolio. It is transferable. You're not like, starting from square one. It's not like you have experience to move forward with. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say there really is probably not one job that can't transfer into conversation design in some way. Everything that you're doing from being a waiter to, being a professor, they can translate into skills that can help you as a conversation designer. Obviously, recognizing what you don't know and skill areas you can improve, that's very valuable, but don't just start your resume at 0 just because the experience that you have previously is not directly in conversation design, because it really is something that it makes a lot of sense. And for me, working in social media before, it was not something that I saw as like a conversation design skill, but that's actually what it is. It's creating conversations just with a human to human, with a brand to, a human. And so how I can talk about those things is something that is valuable to myself in conversation design. And whatever your background is, you have a unique perspective, and you just have to, I love how you said, like, just have the mindset that your skills are valuable to this, and just position yourself as that.
Yeah, exactly. I would say reiterating these top 2 points, which is every job is transferable to conversation design. Don't feel shy about it. And then the second thing is please, please, please don't omit your work experience. I did that mistake in my resume. I wanted to shy away from like a lot of the projects that I did previously, but actually when I included them, that's when people were like, oh, so she's like more well-rounded. Like she knows all about the work-life culture of like these different companies, and on top of that she has this X experience. Really, don't be shy about it. Don't omit anything. And I do have some very, very specific niche advice that maybe isn't super relevant to everyone. But for example, if you do want to work in conversational AI, customer success, or customer self-service areas, and you have worked in the service industry as a customer success rep at a call center, any of these things that interact directly with the customer experience, really highlight it, really put it as like a key word on your resume. Like that's something you definitely should not miss, because I previously did have call center experience and I never highlighted that on my resume, but it's actually things that people and employers really want to hear about.
Yeah, I know for us personally, we do a lot of like automation of call center and helping people be, get more qualified leads into their call center. So having a person who understands how call centers work, what those types of customers are experiencing when they are going into that. And even like I had mentioned, a waiter, someone who works in the service industry, you are doing that same thing. You're just doing it face to face. And so these are interactions that you actually are deciding how you're going to have a conversation with someone based on what they're saying. And it is the exact same thing as conversation design. It's just, obviously it's a lot more natural, and it's a lot more human, but it is something that is relevant. And so don't discount that at all. All right. Well, we have 2 minutes left. So I want to make sure that we have time to just say thank you to both Elaine and Millani for being here and for answering all of our questions. And where can people find you, or what are you working on right now that you want to share with people?
Okay, so, and thank you everyone for joining us. I broke a sweat. You guys, those questions are intense.
This is a marathon.
Guys, like, okay, no, but today was awesome. Thank you so much for the questions, and thank you for being patient with us. So where you can find me, I'm always online. No, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll put in my links somewhere. You can find me on Twitter, everywhere. I'm everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You can also hear my voice if you miss it on Voices podcast. We do launch episodes. Elaine helps out as well. I don't know why she missed in her bio. How dare you? She helps out. I don't know if she's down for everybody. Whatever. Anyway, Elaine helps out with social media. So whenever you see some tweets and like posts and you're like, wow, that's her. Even I'm kind of like, wow, okay. And so yeah, she does some great stuff. So yeah, you'll see us all over social. Ping me if you have any questions about portfolios or transitioning from UX to conversation design, because I've seen it, I've done it, it's exhausting, it's cool, but it's so rewarding. So yeah, if you have any questions, ping me on whatever social media you see Millani Jayasingkam at. I'll be there, hopefully.
How about you, Elaine?
I like how Millani just called out that she's always online, but I feel like the three of us are always online.
Yeah, we are. We're the most online people in this
I mean,
industry. That's for sure.
That's why this session was organized, because we're all like always online. We're like, hey, like the Spider-Man meme that's like.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, my name is Elaine Anzaldo. I go by Elaine in the Bay, and I also do social media on Voice This podcast, and I do like a lot of weird side projects too. I have a blog on Medium. Yeah, I think that's about it. I also have a YouTube video. No plans currently for other YouTube videos, so sorry, but yeah, terminally online.
Yes. I'm also terminally online. And you can join more events like this with me. I host a much smaller group for people to just ask general questions. Portfolios come up a lot, which is why I wanted to create this session. When I send out the recap from this, I will include the link to join next month's group mentorship session. It is on the same platform, and it's a really fun time for people to just come and casually chat and ask any questions that they want, whether that is a portfolio question or an interview question or a what's the best design tool, any question. We are open for that. So I will be hosting the next one sometime in October. And then I also want to say, I know we're over time, but someone suggested this great thing that if you have a portfolio, if you could just put the link to it right next to your name in the introduction so that people can see your portfolio, that would be really awesome. So if you want to share your portfolio with everyone, just go ahead and put the link next to your name, and then people can see your examples. Maybe they can give you some user feedback and testing. But I think that's a really great way for people to promote themselves. I know people were asking, where can you share your links? So this is your opportunity to share your link right now. And you never know who is going to be looking at this. So definitely go ahead and do that if you have a link. If you don't, check these out and use them as inspiration for your own portfolio. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Drop your portfolios if you want. Expect to see a replay of this likely by Friday in your emails. And I hope to talk to you all soon.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.